Geordi LaForge, Chief Engineer of Enterprises D&E. I like Geordi, and how could I not? He's played by one of the most likable, nay, admirable actors of his generation. And you don't have to take my word for it. The thing is, sometimes I wonder if the writers of TNG liked Geordi. In fact, his character is handled so poorly at certain points that I feel the need to present some examples of that mistreatment and try to demonstrate why Geordi LaForge actually deserved better. Before we get into specifics about Geordi, let's back up and talk about the role of Chief Engineer. Because while it's one of the most celebrated jobs in Star Trek, it's also kinda cursed. The Chief Engineer curse wasn't really established as a trope in Star Trek until TNG. As such, the original Scotty largely escapes it. Okay, I said largely. I just said it. For whatever reason, the writers of Star Trek really get a kick out of smacking around Chief Engineers, and equivalents like Chief O'Brien from Deep Space Nine and Stamets from Discovery, who aren't technically Chief Engineers. O'Brien is DS9's Chief of Operations, and Stamets doesn't work in the engineering division at all. Dig the Silver Stripes, my man is Science Division all the way, but, close enough. And Geordi is no exception. The poor guy gets beaten up and abused and psychologically destroyed. There was that episode where he mutated into a scary blacklight alien. There was that time he was captured and tortured by Romulans. There was that time he was captured and tortured by Lore. There was that time he was captured and tortured by Dr. Soren. What was it with having villains kidnap Geordi and strap him to a chair anyway? At least when it was time to make O'Brien suffer, they got more creative. Like, really sadistically creative. But it's not the physical or emotional pain Geordi is forced to endure throughout TNG that inspired this video, nor is it Geordi's unofficial role as the Enterprise's designated friend, though that's also kinda weird. Picard assigns him to be friends with Barclay, with Scotty. He even winds up as the de facto best friend of Hugh, the Borg who learns to use the first-person singular. He's the chief engineer of a Galaxy-class starship. Doesn't he have other shit to do? No, what inspired me to make this video is Geordi's humiliating and deeply cringeworthy love life. And there is no better or worse example of the problems with said love life than Geordi's interactions with Dr. Leah Brahms, which take place during 2 episodes, the first of which comes from TNG's 3rd season and is called Booby Trap. The episode opens with Geordi on a depressing holodeck date with Christy Henshaw. Despite Geordi's palpable, perspiring desperation... Desperspiration? Is that anything? Christy isn't into it, and she ends the date with the dreaded explanation of, "I just don't like you like that." After Christy leaves, Geordi goes to 10 forward to sit at the bar and stare at this random person like a serial killer. Later on, Guinan's like, "What's your problem?" And Geordi's like, "Why doesn't she love me?" Lucky for Geordi, he's about to have plenty to distract him from the desolate domain of heartbreak and isolation that is his social life, because the Enterprise has been caught in a booby trap left over from an ancient interplanetary war, and in a few hours, everyone's gonna be dead. Picard's like, "Geordi, do something about this." So Geordi heads down to engineering, and he's like, "Computer, what can we do to keep the lights on and shit while this booby trap we're stuck in is draining our power?" And the computer says, "You know what? Here are all these notes written by Dr. Leah Brahms, one of the scientists who built the Enterprise's warp engines. And also there's a holodeck simulation of a drafting room where the engines were designed, which might help you for some reason." So Geordi runs the holodeck program, and then the holodeck does that thing where it creates something you didn't actually ask for, except you kind of did without realizing it. In Season 2, that's how they wound up with a self-aware Moriarty hologram. This time, Geordi just asks the program to point something out to him, and the holodeck creates a simulation of Leah Brahms to do the pointing. At first, Geordi's a little confused. He knows he didn't ask the holodeck to make him a woman because he didn't feel the familiar rush of shame mingled with exhilaration that usually accompanies such a request. But he decides as long as Holo Leah's here, she might as well have some personality. So he has the computer give Holo Leah an approximation of the personality of the real Dr. Brahms, and oh man, do they ever hit it off! They make such a great team that when the ship's power reserves get so low that the computer automatically turns off the holodeck, Geordi asks Picard to turn it back on so he can keep working the problem alongside his really cool new simulated girlfriend. I mean, not like a steady girlfriend or anything, nothing exclusive. Well, maybe, but we never, talked about that. It's more like, I like being with her, and I don't know, she's a girl, and she's my friend, and we have fun. Why do we have to put a label on it? Anyway, turn on the goddamn holodeck! Sir. Picard turns the holodeck back on, and Geordi and Leah get back to work trying to figure out how to get out of the booby trap, and Leah is like, I could do it, let me fly the ship. And Geordi's like, it's humanly impossible. And Leah goes, thanks for the setup. I'm not human. And Geordi's like, oh, you mean because you're a lifeless projection animated by the ship's computer? Then why do I have these feelings? Then Picard walks in like, hey, the shields are about to collapse and then we'll all be dead from radiation exposure in like half an hour, so any ideas? And Geordi's like, this is Leah, my friend and colleague. And she's a hologram. And Picard's like, come on, man, are we gonna die or what? Geordi tells Picard the plan to turn everything over to the computer, but while Picard goes to have a think about it, Geordi and Leah run some simulations, and Geordi comes up with an even better idea. To do the opposite of their first idea. Instead of letting the computer fly the ship, turn off the computer and pilot the ship out of the booby trap manually with only minimal power. And they do Geordi's plan, and it works, and they escape from the booby trap. And Picard actually does the flying himself, so he can take the credit, even though it was Geordi's idea. And Geordi runs back to the holodeck, and he tells Leah, look, it's been a blast, babe, but I got a life out there in the real world. I like you, but it's no good between us. We're like two starships passing in a cosmic void. And Leah's like, what's the name of your ship, the SS Incel? And Geordi's like, okay, I deserve that. But it was pretty mean, and like dead on too. And Leah says, I'm with you every day, Geordi. When you look at this engine, you're looking at me. Every time you touch it, it's me. Every time you pry open the dilithium chamber and reach your fingers gently inside, probing, searching, what you're actually doing is... And Geordi's like, I got it, let's smooch. And they smooch. And then Geordi kills her by ending the program. He doesn't, kill her. And that's it. And you know what? Even though there is some problematic stuff in this episode, and even though it makes Geordi look like a hapless, pathetic... Well, I just made an incel joke, didn't I? If this was the end, I'd probably be okay with it. I mean, there's nothing wrong necessarily with having a regular character be unlucky in love. The heroes in TNG are relatively flawless, so seeing one of them be decidedly not good at something is actually kind of refreshing. It's one of the things I like about Lieutenant Barclay, you may recall, if you've watched that video. And Geordi going on awkward, terrible dates is the very definition of relatable content from where I'm sitting. This year, I will have been married 9 years, and my wife and I were a couple for 5 years before that, so it has been a wonderfully long time since I had to go out on a date, but before she and I were together, dating was an absolute nightmare for me. I was terrible at it. I feel terrible for the women who had to endure spending time with me when there was no chemistry, no spark of attraction whatsoever, nothing keeping us there but the dogmatic adherence to the dictates of polite society and the creeping fear of being alone, so horribly, permanently alone, that threatened to overwhelm us, or maybe that was just me, I don't know. I hated it. Finding the right person was amazing. I highly recommend it, but I can still remember how it felt before I found her, and it sucked, and I can really relate to Geordi on that level, is what I'm saying. But that wasn't the end. Dr. Leah Brahms returned, in the flesh this time, for an episode from TNG's 4th season called Galaxy's Child. Picard tells Geordi that Dr. Brahms is coming to the Enterprise to inspect Geordi's engines, and Geordi's like, I've got a plasma injector she can take a look at. And Picard's like, what? And Geordi's like, what? It's not made explicit in the episode, but I like to think Picard remembers walking in on Geordi and Leah in the holodeck that time, and when Geordi gets all excited about the real Leah coming to visit, Picard plays it cool, but there's a voice in his head going, don't make this weird, don't make this weird, don't make this weird. He makes it weird. Dr. Brahms beams aboard, and Geordi's like, hey you. And she's like, I hear you've been screwing up my engines, what the hell, man? And Geordi's like, wow, you're not like your hologram. What? What? Geordi and Leah are kinda testy with each other the whole day. To release the tension, Geordi invites her over to his place for dinner that night. She thinks they're gonna meet and plan out their itinerary for the next few days, because that's what Geordi says they're going to do, but Geordi thinks it's a date, because that's what Geordi wants it to be. She shows up, Geordi's got the lights turned down and some music playing, and he's wearing a sweater that seems to say, "I'm not presuming we're gonna have sex tonight, but if things start moving in that direction, I just want to assure you I am absolutely up for it." Leah's like, "Yeah, I'm not into this," and she bails. The next day, she and Geordi are crawling through a Jeffries tube, and Leah notices this modification Geordi's installed, and she's really impressed, and she says, "You should write a paper about this." And Geordi's like, "Nah, writing's not my thing. I'm more of a reader. But maybe we could collaborate on a paper since you're such an awesome writer." And Leah's like, "You sure do know a lot about me." And Geordi's like, "Yeah, well, I might have Facebook stalked you a little." And Leah's like, "Well, did you check my relationship status? 'Cause I'm married." Cut to Geordi and 10 Forward being all mopey. Guinan walks up like, "What the hell is your problem?" And Geordi's like, "I like the hologram lady, but the real lady is mean and she doesn't think I'm a genius all the time and she's married and I don't like it." And Guinan's like, "Well, maybe you should let go of the fantasy woman you invented and get to know Leah for who she actually is and stop being such a sullen asshole." Meanwhile, the Enterprise has been forced to kill this space whale that attacked it, only it turned out the space whale was pregnant, so they used the phasers to cut the baby free from the corpse of its parent, and then the baby attached itself to the ship and started draining its power. Leah joins the rest of the crew to help figure out what to do, and she says to Geordi, "Hey, maybe I could be of more help if I knew what all you've done to modify the engines. Did you, write it all down somewhere or something?" And Geordi's like, "Yeah, it's all in the computer, knock yourself out." And Leah's looking through the computer, and this ensign walks up and goes, "Hey, did you want to see Geordi's secret holodeck program? Because there it is." And Leah's like, "Okay, that sounds interesting." And she leaves. And Geordi shows up and he's like, "Where's Leah?" And the ensign's like, "Oh, I told her about your secret holodeck program. Was I not supposed to do that?" Geordi runs into the holodeck right as Leah is watching Holo Leah talk dirty about how when you touch the ship, you're touching her. And Leah's like, "You're a giant creep. And now I get why you've been so weird since I came on board. It's because you're a giant creep." And here's where things really go south for Geordi, because he reacts to Leah's completely justified anger about her in the worst possible way. First, he lies to her. He tells her she's got it all wrong because his relationship with Leah was all about solving a problem in a crisis situation. But that's not what it was all about, was it? I mean, yeah, Geordi and Leah were working together to problem solve during a crisis, but so were Geordi and Bakra when they were trapped on Galorndon Core, and they never did that, so far as we know. Second, he starts in with his nice guy bullshit. "You've been mean to me the whole time you've been on the ship, and I've been nothing but polite and accommodating and respectful, but it's not working." Third, she tries to leave, and he physically blocks her from reaching the exit. That's a big no-no. If you're having an argument with someone and they want to walk away, let them walk away. Don't impose your will on them. Unless they're walking into danger, I guess. Like if there's a deadly sursnake in the corridor. But sursnakes are aquatic and native to the planet Argo, which makes it incredibly unlikely there would be one in the corridor outside Holodeck 3 on the Starship Enterprise. So why would you be blocking Leah's way to save her from being attacked by a giant sursnake, Geordi? Fourth, he frames himself as the victim in all this. She's the one who has wronged him, see? Because she's accusing him of being some kind of a skeevy perv when all he wanted was for them to get along. "I'm guilty of reaching out to you," he says, full of impassioned self-righteousness. "I'm guilty of a terrible crime, Doctor. I offered you friendship." He drops the mic and walks out. Nice to see that for as far as humanity has supposedly evolved by the 24th century, we haven't forgotten how to lay on a good old-fashioned guilt trip. So hey, I have a question. Whose dog did LeVar Burton run over to deserve having to play a scene like that? Berman? Pillar? Whose call was it to say, "Hey, let's not only make utter romantic incompetence a recurring part of LeVar's character, let's give him an episode where he's an entitled, self-pitying, gaslighting bastard." He was the host of Reading Rainbow, for Christ's sake. He was in Roots. Now he gets to be forever alone Geordi, prisoner of the friend zone? The worst part is, after Geordi tells off Leah and leaves, we cut to this reaction shot of her looking introspective, like she's thinking, gee, maybe he's got a point. Are we supposed to be liking Geordi in this exchange? Because by the end of that scene, he is totally the asshole there. It didn't have to be that way. That scene could have gone differently. Leah did have the wrong idea about the holodeck program. She seemed to think it was entirely about Geordi having a sexual fantasy about her, which it wasn't. But if all she saw was the image of herself talking dirty to Geordi right at the very end, it's an understandable assumption. Instead of acknowledging her anger and apologizing and then trying to correct her erroneous assumption, Geordi goes straight to his martyr routine. Oh, I'm so sorry, I tried to be your friend. We know Geordi's lying to Leah about his intentions. He lies to Guinan too, telling her before Leah comes aboard that he's not expecting anything romantic, when that's obviously what he's trying so desperately to make happen from the moment Picard tells him Leah's on her way, right up to when she tells him she's married. Would I obsess over getting the lighting just right and finding the perfect mood music if the person coming over for dinner was someone I thought of as just a friend? Maybe if it was Jason. The point is, all of this could have been handled better. If the writers of TNG wanted to make an episode about how Geordi fell in love with the holographic version of someone, then had to deal with the disappointment of learning that the real person wasn't that into him, that's fine. Geordi does seem a little old to just now be learning that particular lesson. Feels like more of a Wesley plot, or maybe that's just me, but there's no reason they couldn't have pulled it off. Instead, we get a show where Geordi acts like a total asshole, but I guess we're not supposed to notice because he's one of the good guys. For this story to work, it would have to acknowledge how badly Geordi is behaving. You could still play the frustration, the heartbreak, the embarrassment, but for those of us who aren't men's rights activists, to sympathize with Geordi in the end, you also have to demonstrate an awareness that Geordi's reaction to Leah in that holodeck scene is unacceptable. Ultimately, Geordi and Leah team up to save the Enterprise from the baby space whale, and, having genuinely bonded through solving a problem during a crisis, they end the episode as friends. There's a brief final scene in 10 Forward where everything seems cool. They laugh about their argument on the holodeck, trade apologies. That's right, she apologizes to him! After that scene on the holodeck where he carries on like a textbook, guilt-tripping, victim-playing, nice guy shitbag, she apologizes to him. That scene works because LeVar Burton and Susan Gibney, who is excellent as Dr. Leah Brahms, sell it well enough that as I watch it, I forget about all the problems that have been left unaddressed. But those problems are still there. Geordi does admit to getting attached to that lady in the holodeck and acknowledges that if he had been honest with Leah from the start, none of this would have happened, so that's good. But those are two quick lines at the very end of the show. The episode closes on this note of all's well that ends well that neither Geordi nor the show itself earn in any way whatsoever. It's not just that Geordi is the only regular Star Trek character to have flailing romantic ineptitude as an enduring characteristic. Him being such a shitty jerk to Leah in that holodeck scene isn't even all of it. There's also the missed opportunity of showing a heroic character have feelings for a person who doesn't reciprocate and deal with it like one of those enlightened 24th century people we're always hearing about. Have Geordi feel the same frustration and disappointment, but not take it out on Leah. Or have him take it out on her, but come to acknowledge his mistake and apologize for it. Either way, as a man who grew up watching this show, I can tell you, I could have used the role model. And obviously, so could a lot of other people. The writers of Star Trek TNG are responsible for a generation of angry misogynists, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, but hopefully I've been able to illustrate why I think the writers of TNG mistreated Geordi. As I said at the outset, I like Geordi. I really like LeVar Burton. They both deserve better than this. Hey folks, well that's another episode of Trek Actually in the Books. Hope you enjoyed that one. I'm going to let you know what the topic of next month's Trek Actually video is going to be in a couple of minutes, but first, I'm going to give some shout outs to some of my newest Patreon patrons. These are the folks who have become patrons at a level of $5 a month or more since the last Trek Actually video, and their names are Drace Domino, thank you Drace. David Walensky, thank you David. Matthew Maeda, thank you Matthew. Saint Swibbins, thank you Saint Swibbins. Joe Culver, thank you Joe. Ian Stewart, thank you Ian. Kayla Powell, thank you Kayla. Joshua Selig, thank you Joshua. Ross Matheson, thank you Ross. Michael Tragakis, thank you Michael. Mike Beatty, thank you Mike. Arash Jafarzada, thank you Arash. Jonathan Humphreys, thank you Jonathan. Alexander Faber, thank you Alexander. Danny Gill, thank you Danny. Casson Scowcroft, thank you Casson. Bush, thank you Bush. David Jennings, thank you David. Matthew Scharnweber, thank you Matthew. The Republican Party is a Nazi party, thank you. The Republican Party is a Nazi party. Wellington Marcus, thank you Wellington. Chris Sanders, thank you Chris. Riley Dosh, thank you Riley. Ask and Tell Project, thank you Ask and Tell Project. Dan Barlow Jr., thank you Dan. Villa Lade, thank you Villa. And Real Life Jolie, thank you Real Life Jolie. Thanks to everybody who is a supporter of this channel through my Patreon page. If you want to support the videos I make, the Trek Actually videos, and all the rest of them that I do, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and become a Patreon supporter of this channel for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month or more gets you a shout out at the end of Trek Actually. I also want to remind you all really quickly that if you like the Star Trek stuff that I do on this channel, you will really like the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I co-host along with the great Jason Harding, The Ensign's Log. A lot of you are already listening to The Ensign's Log and the feedback seems pretty positive. You seem to really like it, which I'm very grateful for. I love doing that show. If you like the Star Trek stuff and you haven't checked out The Ensign's Log, I highly recommend that you check out The Ensign's Log. The links are in the description. You can listen at the website, you can listen on SoundCloud, you can subscribe via RSS using whatever podcast app you prefer, but check out the Ensign's Log. I think you'll really dig it. I also want to remind everybody that if you are a Patreon patron or you are thinking of becoming a Patreon patron at any level from $1 a month on up, you can vote to choose the topic of a future Trek Actually video. And today at noon Eastern, the very day that this episode of Trek Actually goes live, the poll for the August episode of Trek Actually goes up on patreon.com/Steve Shives. And if you are a patron at any level, you can vote for what the August subject of that month's Trek Actually video will be. And I highly encourage all of my patrons and all of you who are thinking of supporting the channel and becoming patrons to do that. Vote in the poll and help to choose the next Trek Actually topic. Now, as far as the Trek Actually topic for July, that topic has already been chosen. My Patreon patrons have spoken, and I can now tell you that the subject of the next episode of Trek Actually, the July edition, will be why Star Trek Insurrection is actually not that bad. A bit of a surprise, I have to say, a bit of a sleeper. Another option in that poll would have been a video about Tuvix, that very famous, very beloved, and very controversial character who appeared in an episode of Star Trek Voyager. And I really thought the Tuvix one was gonna win, but maybe it'll be in the poll for next month, so maybe it'll win for August. Who knows? But for July, the subject, and by quite a large margin, by like 10%, it was why Star Trek Insurrection is actually not that bad. I think a lot of you are just interested to hear what kind of excuses I will make for that movie, which is not a terribly well-liked movie in the Star Trek film pantheon. So I'm looking forward to doing a video about Star Trek Insurrection and why I think it's actually not as bad as a lot of people think. I think it's kind of an underrated Star Trek movie. So that will be for July's Trek Actually topic. I'll be back with a not actually Trek Actually a week from now. That will be another comment response video. So that's coming next week. And then next month in July is the Insurrection not being all that bad video. That's what's coming up as far as Star Trek videos. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this Geordi episode, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.